not an expert on Switzerland, but I know it well enough to say conclusively their political system works because they have a Swiss population with certain attitudes that have evolved over 1,000 years, and it works for them. And they vote, twice a year and all this stuff. And the cantons have a lot of independent power, very weak central government, et cetera, et cetera. But that works with Swiss people. They're changing the population of the West, and particularly of Europe, so fast that you sort of wonder, like, what is that? I mean, the idea that, there is a thing called a Briton or a Spaniard or a Frenchman or Portuguese people or Belgians or people from Liechtenstein or whatever, that there are sort of populations, indigenous populations in these countries that have a certain national character and language and shared history. All of that is being obliterated by mass immigration. It's on purpose. It's against the will of the existing populations of those countries. And it's clearly tied to political power. I mean, am I missing something? I mean, look, this is my view from 3,000 miles away.
No, without a shadow of a doubt, I think the same thing is, it's happening right here.
It's obliterating the United States, but it's harder for Americans to fight back against it because there's our indigenous population, or the American Indians, who aren't even really the indigenous population, but whatever, they were here before the Europeans arrived. They replaced another population who was here before them, but whatever. The point is, we don't have we don't feel we have the moral standing that, say, the Scots would have. Scotland was never, or has not been in a very long time, a colonial power. Why are they doing this to Scotland?
Identity is a sense of identity, personal identity, the sovereign individual, and then that coming together to be, maybe a sense of community in your town, then and it broadens out to national identity, is problematic. I'm utterly convinced that there's just a huge centralization of power going on.
Right.
That there's an anonymous, faceless cabal of people whose names we don't know, whose faces we wouldn't recognize, who are centralizing power. And for the first time, the technology is enabling that to be global. People have tried it in the past, people have been totalitarian in the past, but it's the technology and the reach has never enabled a tyrant to control the whole world. But that is there now, and I think that's what we are hurtling towards. And people like Eric Hoffer and The True Believer and so on, he wrote so effectively about how every mass movement has sought to take away people's national identity and their personal identity. So they want each individual to turn their back on their parents and on their family as being, you can do better than these people. Their ideas are outmoded. They've messed you up, and you'd be better off without that influence. And likewise, they want to cut people away from their national roots, their sense of belonging in a place, and their sense that they are British or that they are French. Because once you get people deracinated in that way, cut away from their roots, and the process is also about making people ashamed of their history, be it their own family history or their national history.
I've noticed.
So that there's nothing in the past but things to be ashamed of. So you get people to disavow the past, to disavow their parents, to disavow the family, to disavow the nation as it's been understood, and then those people are just dots on a spreadsheet. They're just flickering dots on a screen that can be put anywhere. And now you have a global population that don't belong or feel connected to anywhere, and so you can put them anywhere, because they have no roots. And that's been tried over and over again. All the great faiths have attempted something similar. All the great ideologies, all the isms, fascism, communism, whatever, they all seek to do to, as Hoffer explains it in True Believer, they all apply the same tools to get people disconnected until you're just a lone individual that's ready to don a uniform and do something new in the face of utopia, the nowhere place that is the ideal future that's easy to sell people because it doesn't actually exist.
But what it means is total destruction. I mean, I see mass immigration in Europe as a form of warfare against the indigenous population. They're being destroyed and degraded Very obvious to me as a serial visitor to that continent over 50 years. And it gets worse every time I go there.
Yeah.
But I noticed that the people who are from there, whose parents were born there, whose ancestors were there 1,000 years ago, in your case, wearing like face paint and skirts with spears or whatever, scary Highland tribes. Like none of those people feel free to stand up and say, what are you doing? Like, no, you can't flood my country with people from another place because they're not Scottish and I am, and you're wrecking my country. Like, why can't, that's not racist. That's just obvious.
Yeah. And it's also, it's also important to remember all the time that these people are being uprooted and moved in their turn as well.
Oh, I agree.
Everyone. And so, so what happens is, yes, indigenous populations are being flooded by people from elsewhere, but those people have been uprooted by this, by the same forces of chaos and disruption. The West has done god awful things to one country of the Middle East and elsewhere, one after another, African countries, and those people have been cut away from their roots, and they're on the move as well. So everyone's victim in this, everyone, and where people turn up in large numbers, where they, from an ethnic and cultural and heritage point of view, don't belong. But that's also not their fault. They're pawns on the board as well. And of course, what happens is that the people, the incumbent population, feel threatened by the arrival of the new, and they get angry with the incomers, when really we should all everyone should link arms and say, who did this? Let's calm down, everyone. Let's sort out exactly how this has happened to all.
How are we being manipulated?
Why are you, who's moved you here? So it's important because that you fall so readily into the.
I agree, but do you have that conversation in Scotland specifically?
It's very difficult because, of course, everything, any kind of dissent, any kind of raising a voice in that way, brings out the same predictable tools from the toolbox. So you just get called. I've long ago, I've been described as anti-Semitic for one reason and another. I've been described as white supremacist for one reason and another. I've had all the labels, and you said right at the beginning, you're now known as a conspiracy theorist. They're almost badges of honor.
Well, I agree.
If you're not being tarred with those brushes, then you're not doing your bit. Because if you can immediately, that old line about that you're over the target when you're taking flack. If they've got nothing better than to call you anti-Semitic, white supremacist, whatever, then you think, oh, I must be doing something right, because that's just the same old box of clumsy, blunt tools that get brought out to shout down anyone who's actually asking important, pertinent questions. But we're not going to answer them because we're not going to give them the answer, because the answer will expose us, the baddies, even further. So let's just dismiss them as
does it still work in Scotland, in the UK?
Well, I think, as I say, because many people are now finding that it's a badge of honour to be. I've been a Putin apologist. I've had that one flung at me. I've been all sorts of things just because I've said. We're jumping into all of these stories at the moment. In the third act was actually the expression that Jimmy Dore used to me when I had him on my show the other week, and he said, everyone was invited to join the Ukraine story in the third act. But there's pages and pages of this play before you get to the Russian tanks trundling across the Ukrainian border. You're coming in late. You've joined the cinema in the last. Well,
there had been a war in progress for 8 years,
and now it's Israel Gaza, and everyone's invited to that all started on October the 7th, and you go, no. So it's all obvious. It's all obvious stuff, and because those turn spotlights onto places and stories and backstories that the troublemakers, the original troublemakers, do not want to be confronted with, then hence shutting everything down, censorship, labeling, dismissing people as whatever bad name they can think of.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.